draw this diagram, and you are being able to get all your answers over here right now. So if you will just draw one horizontal and one, may I request if you can mute your mic, please, Sarur, please mute your mic. Thank you very much. Okay. So I'm been actually doing it. If you see that, for example, you might have seen that there are into the 4 quadrants I have divided it. Now look into that part. In the first quadrant, on this part, now we are having a 4 quadrants, and I'm going to reflect upon very clearly that on the horizontal domain, there is looking forward, and there is, on the other hand, is a looking backward. So this is a horizontal domain. On the vertical domain, it is asking, and it is on the other hand is a tell. Now question is, where exactly is the coaching process? So I'm going to divide all of these over here. So we are going to get a very simple understanding onto it. So for example, if I'm being on that part where I'm being asking what? I'm been asking questions. If I'm been asking questions, and what I'm been doing, and I'm been looking forward for what? Looking forward for solutions. So anything which fall on this quadrant is actually the quadrant of coaching. So if I'm asking question, and I'm going to talk about more in detail about that, how coaching is so much impactful, and my perspective is to reach to some of the solutions, and I've been forward looking, and I've been actually trying to see some of the performance things which I would like to improvise in the future, then this domain I've been doing a coaching aspect over here. Now another aspect is, if I'm being on the other domain, if I'm being telling, so telling mean I'm giving you some of the answers. If I'm giving you some of the answers, and I'm being on solutions part, and if I'm being on the looking forward aspect, so I'm being actually operating in the domain of what you can say, I'm being in the mentoring process. So when I've been telling you with the answers, and I'm been focused you on the looking forward, I've been focusing you on the solution aspect, I'm on the mentoring. Interesting aspect is any of the other aspect which you have been familiar with. For example, when you talk about consultancy, if you are a consultant, what you are doing? You are giving the answers, and you are being forward looking, and you are being talking about the solutions. So any of the things, right, training, even if you are been doing. So what you are doing in the training, you are telling the answers to the problem, and you are forward looking, and you are providing solutions. So mentoring, consultancy, training come onto this domain when you are asking empowering questions, and the whole aspect is to identify the theme in which people can come up with the answers themselves, and you facilitate their journey towards the journey on the forward looking aspect. This is a coaching aspect, this is a mentoring aspect. Now another aspect which is very interesting to talk about is, for example, you are asking questions and you are listening to it, and you are looking into the past. You are looking into the past. So whenever we talk about past, you are looking focused on what are the issues, what are the problems any specific person is having. You are looking at the past, you are focusing on the problem, and you are asking a question. What you are doing right now, you are doing a counseling. So here you are doing counseling. When you are asking question and you are talking about the problem. So for example, when I say that when the people have gone through certain sort of dilemmas in their life, for example, some of a person suddenly lost his job, or some of the near one and dear one in the family. Now what exactly been happened? There's a bigger problem, there's a bigger challenge, something in the past, and you are being actually engaging the individual with an empathetic outlook, listening to that, what exactly is the support you can discuss about on that aspect. This is about counseling. Now, one more interesting aspect over here is, which is called, for example, that you are giving the answers and you are looking into the backward, you are looking into the problems what they have been having. For example, many of the people you might have seen that they are having certain sort of phobias. So for example, some of the people have a claustrophobia. So they are afraid to get trapped into a confined space. So it's one of the phobias. So whenever you go into the deeper root of that phobia, you always discover there are certain roots at the back. There was something might be happen in my childhood. There was some scenario that's been happened in my childhood which actually has caused me onto that. Because I'm talking about claustrophobia, I remember that during my childhood days, whenever the school we have been having, during the early school days, might be I was a grade 2 or grade 3 student, that was some of the problem which has been happened, that we have around with our classroom, there was a small store, and one of our teacher, whenever we, being as a naughty kids, were doing some of the fun sort of stuff over there, or something which was not being acceptable for our teacher, she used to close us for a while, just for a minute, not more than that, just for a few seconds. She just pushed us into that store and she closed it. And because of that, that element of fear sometimes has seated into myself. And I remember that it took a lot of time for myself to come out of that, because even if I've been grown up, even into the closer space, suddenly that feeling haunt me and I feel like I'm being trapped somewhere into the similar situation. I actually have to get the help of a therapist in order to come out of that. So this is the therapy zone. So in this, when you are talking about the solutions and you are thinking backward and you are talking about the problems, so you can see that this is a therapist. So these are the psychiatrists or psychologists which actually work onto that area. Now, I hope let's recap quickly what I'm saying, that if we are having a solution and are looking forward to the one extreme and the problem and the looking backward, and we divide from asking questions to telling answers, so the quadrant 1 is a coaching domain, because in this coaching we are being asking questions and we are being actually giving a solution onto that. Now, whenever we look into the coaching part, very interesting history I'm going to talk about. In 1970, there was one of the tennis coach. What he has observed, a very interesting thing he has observed, his name was Timothy Gallwey. So he observed that whenever he's on the court, he's giving the guidance and the tips to his trainees. And of course, they are listening to it. But sometime he observed the pattern that when he's not on the court, when he's not available on the court, the trainees, the people who are being there to learn tennis, when they are been doing some of these strokes by their own self, they are learning on a very faster mode. That was a very interesting phenomena which he has observed. Then he keenly watched into it. And when he keenly watched into it, he devised a strategy. He has actually written a book, very interesting book he written, The Inner Game. And he identified that the people have all the resources, all the answers available within themselves. But the problem is that sometimes they are being blinkered. So they are not being able to have an ownership of the answers which is being provided by someone else. So that was a philosophy, he worked onto it. And he devised a theory that if you get your coachee and ask a most empowering question, in which these coaches started looking for a different options, and if you give them that sort of responsibility that they are going to take a lead in taking the actions by themselves, they took the ownership and they are going to have more impactful results. So that was a theory which was being taken from that book, from Inner Game. And in 1980s, there was one of the very famous guru, you can say, which has emerged as a guru of coaching. His name was Sir John Whitmore. So 1980, he took that concept and he took it into the organizational context, and he looked into the performance of the managers and the leaders, and he said, if we apply this concept into the context of the organization, with many of the managers and the leaders, they have been having a performance issues, how can it work? And when he applied those concepts, which has been learned from that tennis game and from that original concept by Timothy Gallwey, he actually found an amazing result. He has observed that he's been able to enhance the performance of those leaders and the organization by virtue of applying of these coaching principles. And because this concept becomes so famous that he has written one of the bestseller book, which was Coaching for Performance. One of the best book, you can say, which I have read on the coaching part. It is written by Sir John Whitmore, and it's actually the millions of that copies has been sold out. So I recommend strongly, if you like to develop yourself as a coach, let's look into that, because the whole important in the coaching process, what he talked about, that you have to assign responsibility, and the people who took the responsibility by themselves, and if they are been working in that domain in which they have all the answers within themselves, they can make a miraculous achievement. So for example, if I started asking you some of the interesting questions, and just think about that. If I ask you a question, imagine that all your financial worries have been taken away. For example, if suddenly you got $5 million in your account right now, if I ask you a question, if imagine for a while that there is a $5 million suddenly came into your account, being given to you as a gift by the government, what is the one thing you are going to do now? Now you think about it. What is the one thing I'm going to do? And whatsoever the answer you are going to give, this is your inner call. This will be your inner self. But why it has not been emerged? Because there are a lot of constraints which are always been happening. So the role of a coach is asking an empowering question. Asking an empowering question. So in this way, for example, if I ask you another question, if I say, whatsoever you have known up till now in your professional career, for example, you said, I have spent 10 years of my career, 20 years of my career. Now you have something very, very valuable experience with you. If I ask you the thing that after 20 years of your experience, 20 years of experience, what you have learned right now, and if you have to redo the same thing again, if you have to redo your business again, if you have to redo your job again, what are the things which will not do again? What are the things which will do more? Now, if I ask you this question, now this question started triggering some of the interesting response from you. And being as a coach, I can facilitate that. I can ask more empowering questions to direct you towards the future and towards the solutions of some of the problems which you have been facing over here. So coach is a very interesting role of it. As I mentioned, I'm going to recommend you that book, which is Coaching for Performance. Amazing book. Just go and read that. You can get that. Now, coming back, which is interesting, another interesting area which is very closer to my heart, and as I mentioned, process. Now, first of all, where that mentoring word has came. From where that mentoring word has came, I was digging out the history of it. There was, in the ancient time, there was one of the famous poem which you might get on the net as well. It was said Odyssey. So that was written by Homer. So Homer has written a poem, Odyssey, in which there was one character which has named as a mentor, and mentor was the person he has assigned for the teaching and guidance of his son. So that was in that poem. He has coined the word mentor, and later it has been taken by the professional terminology in the mentoring process. In the mentoring process, we are being giving an answers, and we are being looking forward and being the solutions part onto it. Now, I remember I'm going to quote one very interesting example, how much this is very important, the role of mentors in our life. I remember that one of my, when I was studying in a university, so my colleague who was right now in Pakistan, he's one of the top-notch architect, one of the most famous architect. He's been here. He was my classmate. I was in a different technology. He was in architecture. I remember when he started his job. So he started with one of the very famous architect in my native city, and the job has a very meager salary at the start. And one day when I come across to him, I asked him this question. I said, why you have started this job? It has such a meager salary, and your father has already had a good business somewhere in the other city. He given me a very interesting answer to that, in which I discovered now what he was been talking about, the importance of that mentoring. He said, Kamran, I've been doing this job only for 10 minutes. Now, it was a very strange answer. What do you mean by only for 10 minutes? What do you mean by that? I asked this question to my friend, and he said, Kamran, I've been doing this job. There are certain projects which has been given to me, and throughout the day, all the architects, they work on that project. I said, fine. He said, at the end of the day, that most famous architect of our country, in which the company I've been working with, he came at the end of the day and gave 10 minutes to all the architects to discuss what are the things, what are the issues, what are the learning they have got out of this project. And he said, I wait for these 10 minutes each day, because these 10 minutes are gold for me, because the mentoring I got in 10 minutes is actually the real value addition in my life. And I was amazed. I was not having a concept of mentoring at that time. and to tell you that story, that he got that thing, and with that wisdom that he need mentors who can actually guide them, inspire them, lead them for some of the success. That was the thing which he has been happened, and he happened to be to the higher echelon in his career. So when you look into the mentoring aspect, my dear friend, mentoring is about giving solutions. Mentoring is about holding your hand. Mentoring is about, for example, if I'm having almost 30 years of my professional career in public speaking, for example. Now, if some person would like to learn something about a public speaking, you can guide that person, you can handhold that person because by virtue of your experience. Similarly, if you're working somewhere in a maintenance area, you're working in some of the technical area, you are having 20, 30 years of your experience, you are a best match to be a mentor because you know so much in your life right now after experimentation on day-to-day work that you can handhold a person, can guide them, advise them towards the solution, towards some of the things, the destiny. You can let them through, you can facilitate them. So in this way, mentoring, you need to be a subject matter expert because in that instant, your experience sharing of value. But the interesting contrast with coaching is you do not require to be a subject matter expert, even into that area in which you do not have any idea about the type of the business they have been in. Still, you can do a coaching of the leaders as well because you have to trigger some of the interesting questions for them in which they started looking for their own answers over there. So that is the difference in which we can talk about. The mentoring process is being very interesting. I remember one of the another interesting aspect is that you might know the word Gibran, Khalil Gibran. And in his book, he has written one interesting quote. He said, one day that person came to me and asked me about my age. I was almost around 25 years of age at that time. He asked me, Gibran, how old you are? How old you are? And Khalil Gibran said, I am 1,000 years of age. When he said 1,000 years of age, the man said, are you mad? Are you kidding with me? You doesn't look like more than 20, 30 years of 25 years of age. Why you are saying 1,000 years of age? He said, I can prove it. I can prove it. And he said, okay, prove me how you are 1,000 years of age. Then Khalil Gibran said, listen, that whenever I was been growing in my life, and if I come across a person who's having 50 years of his experience or 30 years of experience, and he taught me one thing which I can add into my life as a part of his experience, I feel like that it is an addition of 50 years into my life. And if I count with all the knowledge and wisdom which I've gathered up till now, I can say that I'm 1,000 years of age. So my dear friends, please remember, the maturity is not by virtue of number of years I've been having in this world. It is not according to my ID, how many years. The real maturity is that how much my mental age is higher than my physical age. So maybe I'm 20 years of age, but if my mental age is of 40 or 50 years, then this is maturity. All right? And a coach always have a great questions for your answers. And when you talk about mentoring, mentors always have a great answers to your questions. Now, does it been clear for you what I'm trying to say? A coach has always had a great questions for some of the answers which you have to give, and mentor has always have a great answers for some of the questions. Now, that story is one of the saint want to teach his disciples some of the life lessons, some of the interesting life lessons. So what he did, once they have been moving, they are going together, what he did on the way, he found some of the mud and he drawn a line on that mud. He drawn a line on the mud. That saint has drawn a line. And he asked his disciples, he asked a question, can you shorten that line? Can you shorten that line, make it smaller without touching that line? Now that was a very empowering question, and then all the disciples that think about, without touching it, how can we make it small? How can we make it small? And then they had a questions among them, so he triggered the thought process within them. When they all given up, they said, we can't do anything. Saint, our mentor, tell us what we have to do. We didn't know how to make this line shorten without touching it. Then what his mentor or saint said, What he did, he instantly, what he did, it said it's very easy. You can make it smaller without touching it by drawing a bigger line in parallel to that. Now, have you seen that? This line instantly becomes smaller to that. Now, what is the life lesson he said to his disciples? He said, my dear students, my dear disciples, always remember this thing. In life, whenever you've been come across in sort of any competition, you are not required, you should not put your efforts in cutting the size of the people who are in your competition and making them look like small. Don't waste your energies onto that. What you have to do in your life, you are your own best competition. Keep on enhancing your scale of contribution. Keep on enhancing your scale of work, that anything in proportionate to your contribution looks smaller and negligible. And that is the best lesson what that great mentor has give to all of his students over there. All right, I think we have got our energy today. So let's live with that message that we are going to draw the bigger lines all around, our bigger lines in form of our families, our bigger lines in terms of our professional contribution, our bigger lines in terms of sense of our gratitude. Keep on drawing the bigger lines, that anything which is in against, which anything which comes in competition with you, become smaller and insignificant. Thank